Hi, Mike. Thanks for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Michael Lloyd. The CEO and one of the founders of Dope Coffee. Also a hip hop artist. I go by Creative Mike the Rapper. I love to make music, and yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Can you talk a little bit about how you got into coffee?
Yeah, so 2014, I was active duty in the United States Marine Corps, and we didn't have a coffee shop in the small town where the base that I was located in. So just coming from Southern California, right? So this lifestyle of wonderful coffee, we had already been spoiled and we were used to it. And so I also had an entrepreneurial bug in myself, and I just wanted to get out there and create something that I love for the community. And that's really where my journey in the coffee began.
And is there something that you specifically like to emphasize about your coffee and coffee shop?
Yeah, it's really the community aspect. So, well, it was two things. My first brand, my first coffee shop is called Solar Cafe. Like I said, so it was in a small town, 5,000 people, military town, and I wanted to create a space that folks could come together in the community, right? I wanted to create a space that folks could have really good coffee, but I also really also love talking about culture. And so initially, when I started in coffee, Solar Cafe, as you can kind of hear with the name, like solar, being sun, the entire menu had something to do with kind of space or aviation and aeronautics. So I was able to bring out a little bit more of my kind of love for science and technology there. That place was like 20% solar powered, right? So I did all the wiring and things like that myself. So it was a really good experience. But the coffee itself, we I just wanted to focus on very high quality coffee, right? Like, so oftentimes in America, I think folks got really confused about what good coffee was, especially with Starbucks, right? All the different terminology, the different nomenclature for this type of coffee versus that type of coffee. With Dope Coffee, right, the brand that I'm working on now, I wanted to demystify that, right? And just like, you know how sometimes terminology can keep people away, right? It'll be a barrier to access. Like if I don't understand something, I'm not going to go participate in it, right? And so that's really what I'm looking to do with coffee, right? It's the product should be really good, but there has to be a second and third layer. If not, I think you just become a regular coffee brand like everyone else.
My original plan for this project was to just go up to people at coffee shops and ask them, "Hey, did you know we were going back to the moon?" and getting their thoughts.
Nice. That's
I
that. I mean,
Oh, I was just
sure.
gonna say, since you try to create a community in your coffee shop, any advice on the approach? I mean, I like a way to like engage people that makes them feel comfortable.
Oh man, so here's the thing I'm gonna tell you. When you're running a coffee shop, you especially so my first coffee shop was a drive-through, right? So you get a new person every 4 minutes. And then you start to realize that everyone shows up a different way. Everybody's got something different going on in their life. So one of the things that I learned to do best as a cafe owner is to just listen, right? Within like 30 seconds of somebody telling you they want that latte, they're gonna follow up with like whatever's going on in their life, right? And so you just get used to being able to like make coffee and prepare drinks and put things together while also like hearing someone's story and being able to like empathize with them. And that's really what I'm talking about when I say community. For some reason, like coffee is this really deep experience for everyone, right? So we kind of like let our guard down. Like we go into a coffee shop and we feel like it's like our special place. So yeah, I mean, I think anything works. One thing in society right now that we need to get better at is just like having the courage and the audacity to just go like, hey, we're going back to the moon, right? And what do you think? I think we need more of that. That's a big part of why I created Dope Coffee, was because like obviously coffee makes you chatty, right? You want to talk about things, but also as a culture and as a society, we need that conversation, right? Like you and I should be able to dialogue, frankly, about anything, right? And that's kind of one of the things that I want us to be able to kind of accomplish more.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. We're talking at each other, not to each other.
Yes, agreed. I mean, look around in society right now. We tend to, everyone is like kind of really solid in their viewpoint, right? Like everyone thinks that their ideas are the most unique and the most original. Um, So maybe to kind of go a little bit more into my coffee experience, my first shop was I opened it obviously near a military base, so a very heavy conservative area, and I'm really not that conservative, and so it would be it was interesting in 2016, especially right the year leading up to the election, like this kind of town that I had been in for a few years, and you didn't really know who people were and where they stood, and like all of a sudden, like people were on their side of the fence, right? And that's okay. But what I noticed again, like once folks came to me, a lot of that just fell off momentarily, at least in their life, and they were able to just see me as a person, connect with me as a person. And then we find ourselves talking about things other than like the polarizing topics in our life. Like we talk about, you know, where kids are on the way, right? Like where are your kids headed after school? Like what project you have working around the house, right? Like how you like things that we all go through, right? That's one of the things that I really learned through coffee is that, you know, race, socioeconomic background, none of that stuff really matters when you get the person one-on-one, right? Like there's I'd say it's less than a hundredth of a percent difference between two individual people, right? Once you just stack them up one-on-one. And then coffee brings that out in people, right? And this I have definitely realized that, right? Like I have some things that I want to bring out in society, and I couldn't do that, right? I used to lecture folks all the time, right? And talk at them, right? Fuss my viewpoint at them. That's not going to work. No one is going to listen to me kind of scream and fuss and shout. And so I just learned with coffee, right? Like I have a platform now that I can dialogue with people, and I don't know. I hope that spreads a bit.
I think that'd be fantastic. Any plans to like spread the coffee shop and create a chain or something like that?
Yeah. So we're working on our second location right now. That's going really well. Um, when you say a chain, I don't know how much we will be a coffee shop, right? As opposed to being a brand. Like I told you, there's a huge infusion of hip hop, right, into dope coffee. And so I'd rather us stay focused on the culture, and the culture that I'm trying to build, quite frankly, think of more of a music and live entertainment setting paired with great coffee, right? So that's not a daily, right? Monday through Friday, you don't go to a hip hop show at 9 o'clock on the way to work. But that type of a venue, right? That type of a culture, more of a festive culture. Yeah, that's really the kind of vibe that I see bringing around. So,
Well, if people did, I wonder how it would change the world going to a hip hop show at 9 o'clock on Monday on the way to work.
yeah, I love it. I love it. Maybe we'd be a little less stressed out. I don't know.
I'm always looking at the jobs at SpaceX, just kind of going through the career page. I'm like,
Yeah,
man, I'd be so cool to be part of, making humanity interplanetary and stuff like that. And there's a job listing for barista. It always
I
catches
saw
my
it.
eye. And I keep thinking what you're saying, it's like coffee is like when people talk. So it's like you're the central point of the company. You get to hear all the stories from all
Yeah.
over. It seems like it'd be a really cool job.
It would. I should apply because it was it a position at Starbase, or where was the barista position?
They have one at Starbase. They also have one
Yeah,
at their Hawthorne, California location. But yeah, you
yeah.
should definitely.
I should apply. I've been trying to get Elon Musk to invest in dope coffee. So maybe if I can just whip up drinks right in front of them, I'll be able to get their attention right then. So
Dope Coffee may be the first a coffee shop on Mars.
we could definitely go for that. Look, so believe it or not, because I'm a space enthusiast, right? So we're working on a ready to drink coffee formula, right? That's just gonna go in packets. I mean, I'll give it away. Astro Coffee, right? I'm sure someone's already doing it, but I just think it was cool, right? Like I was one of those kids that you got to get the space ice cream and all the little food that you take in outer space, and I was like, man, it's just such a cool concept, right? Because anything that you do in space, obviously, you have to do it like 100 times better than you do it on Earth. And so those types of things like obviously drive innovation, right? And so when you say a coffee shop on Mars, like in my head, I'm thinking like, all right, how are we going to make this work, right? And you definitely can do that, right? And that's the cool thing about being an entrepreneur, right? And being an innovator is that for a lot of folks, they would look at the reasons we should not, aspire to open a cafe on Mars. And I look at it as why we should, right? Because what would happen is you'd probably have the world's first autonomous cafe, right? Like that's what you would create to have your drive-through coffee shop on Mars, Yeah.
Or even on the moon, like moon buggy coffee or something like that. I don't know.
I'm with it. Look, I'm with it. So look, I was a combat engineer in the Marine Corps. So one of the things that we did is a lot of heavy equipment operations. So had about 12 dozers, road graders, compactors, things like that. So I just always been thinking about who's going to make the roads on the moon, right? So maybe I can put the roads down and then install my cafes, between outposts. There we go.
I was listening to a talk by like the head of the European Space Agency here in Houston, and he was going around talking about creating a moon village, which would be like kind of like this international collaboration to like create sort of like a facility on the moon. And he was from Germany, and he's like talking about NASA's capabilities versus European capabilities, and he's like, NASA could do so much, but we're going to build the roads because Americans have slow roads. So I thought that's funny.
That is very true, right? Like we do a lot of things really well. I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to tell you, I'm personally very excited. I mean, obviously, I get you've been following. I've really been following the like America's return back to the moon. So especially as a Black guy, right? Like I'm a space enthusiast, so I get a lot of like, why is that important? Like why are we gonna spend $7 billion, assembling some rocket and then just like launch this much of it in space? Like why are we doing that? And for me, as a kid growing up interested in science fiction, do you remember the movie The Black Hole?
The Black Hole, I do not.
Okay, it's a great movie. I think it came out in 1979. I just watched it last night, right? So I was born in '84, so this movie, predates me about 5 years. And it was just, interstellar travel. They're studying a black hole, and I was glued to the edge of my seat the whole time, even though this movie's close to 30 years old, because of the mindset of exploring, right, and trying something new. And so to hear, that. First of all, I think SpaceX is going to beat NASA back to the moon by like a decade, right? And they'll probably already have their own roads and habitats built on the moon before any government agency makes it. And that's what I'm so excited for right now, to see like the public and the private, right, like competing so aggressively. I just think it's going to make us better. And that's the whole point, right? The whole point is that the technological impacts that come back down here to Earth are just like, it's already been magnificent, right? Like things we see around us all day that we don't really pay attention to. I think that by the time that we permanently establish a settlement on the moon, and I just think that we will have learned so much about how to survive in any environment, and I think that's critical for the future of humanity. So either way, I can get off on those topics a lot.
Yeah, I know. I have the same situation too. So how about your hip hop? Like how long have you been a hip hop artist? And do you have a band or a group that you work with?
Yeah, so I've been an artist really my entire life. Started off over on the gospel side, so I was writing gospel songs and hymns. Hip hop really to 2003, 2002, as a college freshman. I was already into spoken word and poetry and writing things like that. But hip hop really was kind of just hitting its peak in the late 90s, right? And so I was a young kid just listening to it, and had already built my own recording studio in my dorm, right, as a sophomore. So I was the only guy that had a microphone and a audio interface and all that cool stuff, back in 2000, and really just got into it. I used to get picked on a lot for my music. It wasn't that good early on, and then I just stuck with it. I love it. I will never stop, right? It's one of these things that, like, for me, it drives the brand. It drives my life. If I allow kind of my artistic endeavors in hip hop to be like all the way at the forefront, what happens is, so I have really high standards. So if I want my hip hop to go well, it means all these other things have to be lined up in front of it, and it makes me a more disciplined person. So I love it. I make all of my music with my Dope Coffee Founders team, right? So my wife is my co-founder. She's also a vocalist. You'll hear her on a lot of my tracks. And my producer is my cousin, who's also my COO. So that kind of creates this wonderful balance within the company where the kind of soul and the reason, for us existing, that culture that I'm talking about behind it, is present in our music, is present in our kind of business work ethic. And it sets the tone to where we don't have to reach, right? Like everything that you get from us is going to be authentic because quite frankly, it's just who we are, right? Like we don't, there's no reason to hide who you are when you're already trying to diverge, from the path that folks in front of you are walking. So yeah, hip hop, I love it. I just love being able to make music. No, it's exciting for me. It definitely, it just keeps me happy. Keeps you talking about it brings me up and puts me in a great mood.
Is there a place that people can listen to it online?
Yeah, you can go to my website, creativemiketherapper.com. If you just type in Creative Mike the Rapper on just type it in Google. My latest project that I would recommend checking out is Spinach. The album is called Spinach. And if you're a space enthusiast, you might like tracks 3 and 4. So I did a space combo back to back with a song called Elon Musk. And if you listen to that song with Elon Musk, what folks don't realize, do you remember the Demo 2 launch for SpaceX?
Mm-hmm. And with Doug and Bob?
So yeah, Doug and Bob. So the actual countdown is in the track. You'd have to listen closely. I edited a little bit. I use a lot of the pre-countdown. And then I use some of the radio chatter after they launch. And at the beginning, it's an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? Like Tyson talking about Elon Musk. So it's just this really cool way for me to be able to take all of these things that I like. And then the song next was Venus. That's kind of more of a cinematic approach to me. But the cool part is at the end. I don't know if you were a Star Trek fan, but I was a huge Star Trek fan. And so when Geordi LaForge, he had an opportunity to take over the Enterprise as the Starship commander once. It was the first time that a Black character in that franchise had been a commander on a starship. And I remember seeing it as a child, and it really kind of like flipped a light on in my head, like, what? Like first you just didn't even see Black characters on TV, and then to see him like commanding the starship. And I was already a huge LeVar Burton fan, just from like the Reading Rainbow and some other things that he had done. And so those are 2 little gems that I stuck in the album for any folks that are kind of like, space enthusiasts and Star Trekkies, because, I'm a self-professed geek, so I'm not afraid to bring that stuff right to the front of everything I do. So
yeah, I just typed in Creative Mike into Google, and before I could type any more, it already had the auto suggestion of the rapper. So it's like Google knows you.
Working on my SEO game.
It's doing well.
Nice.
So would it surprise you that about 80% of the people that I talk to in a coffee shop don't know we're going back to the moon?
No, that wouldn't surprise me at all. No, quite frankly, as we've been talking, I was thinking about a lot of my early childhood experiences, right? Like I would have all these books with me, like about like solar power and things, and most people would just look at me like I was crazy. Like, why are you studying that? Like, this is not important. And so I could totally see it today, right? Like everyone's stuck on Instagram and Twitter and whatnot. And so it's something cool. Like, I mean, I doubt folks know that we're like launching folks up into space, like at a rate that's never been done in human history. I just think most of humanity is just not paying attention right now. I mean, we're in the golden age right now. You probably won't see, it probably hasn't been this exciting, I would imagine, since like the microchip was first invented, and you just kept seeing like massive leaps forward. That's what I'm looking forward to with all these like space launch systems. It's more like, I mean, the systems are cool, but they're just rockets, right? And they're basically the same as like the rockets that we were launching in the 40s. To me, it's that so many of them can get to orbit now. You have this scale that's happening that hasn't been seen before. And I don't know. I try to think about this every day. Like, where is this heading? Right? Like what is orbit gonna be like 30 years from now? And then the moon, right? So that's awesome. I think that, well, it's not awesome, right? That 80% of the people don't know. But again, I personally, I think that's on NASA, right? Like if we have a national governing body that isn't doing, I personally would say isn't doing much to spread awareness beyond like in America, we love preaching to the choir. So like NASA preaches to space fans, but you know, maybe you can pitch this if you're talking to the folks down there. So Travis Scott, a super rap star, right? I'm like, you guys need to put him in a capsule and let it orbit the Earth and do a live stream hip hop show. Because then everyone will be interested. Like, hey, Travis Scott's flying over in 30 seconds, right? Like you can time it and watch. Make a little app and just do cool stuff. I've been emailing them these suggestions for years. I haven't gotten any responses yet. So maybe I'll be the first music director for NASA space flight.
Yeah, that would be pretty awesome having people out there with like an antenna tracking the station as it goes across to listen to the concert. And they're
There you
like,
go.
you know, everybody has their own unique experience of it because nobody gets to hear the whole thing.
I like that. Actually, I like that better. See, I was thinking a live stream, but I kind of like the direct broadcast, right? So you can pick them up during the time that you can get them. That would be cool. So there you go. Travis Scott, NASA, y'all listening, link up. It'll work.
And the good thing is, you know, it'd be a lot safer from a crowd control perspective.
You know, that's actually what made me think of it the first time. Well, you know, I was talking to Samson, right, a few it was months ago, maybe, you know, almost a year, and I was talking about slapping the word dope on the side of a rocket, right? Because that's a whole thing that I do want to do one day. But yeah, then it just, I had always been talking about like doing hip hop shows in like unique areas, like creating experiences that don't exist, right? And so, yeah, it would be. I just see that at a certain point we'll have to get past just taking folks with PhDs to space, and that, I mean, like William Shatner was. I'm gonna toss up about William Shatner going to space. I think that there are some folks. So if you're a purist, right, about technology and space flight, you probably want to see more data and more science done in space. But if you want to see enthusiasm for a space like circle the globe, right? I think those are two totally different things, right? They have two different objectives. One is mostly focused on branding, right? Like I really love when NASA brought back the old logo, right? That was just like an iconic style thing. I was like, cool, like y'all get cool points for doing that. NASA kind of needs a few more cool points right now, right? Like we haven't even been like flying people for a long time. And so since we're back in the game, I just think it's probably time to up the excitement some. Figure out how to get the public involved. I mean, like space launches in particular are exciting. Like I love how SpaceX does their live streams on like days that they do launch. Like we just need to figure out how to get the public more involved. Yeah, just get the public more involved, and then I think we will have a society that can like literally like reach for the stars. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. People hear something about NASA doing something or something about space. I think their first thought is, yeah, right, it's not going to happen. They've said that before. And
yeah,
then if they think any further beyond that, their next thought is, what does it have to do with me? So it's all
yeah,
about, you know, how do you make them feel like they're participating and engaged on it?
yeah, and that's difficult. Like that's it. I have those thoughts sometimes. I'm like, what probe? Where are they sending it? Why? Like, I don't know. I mean, I get it. But the folks down at NASA, they're so much smarter than everybody else. So like what they see as like problems to explore are just 1,000x like what the average person's thinking about. So yeah. Yeah.
You know, we can hope.
Yes. We can. Yes, we can.
Sometimes though, I think people get just caught up in doing the job and one foot in front of the other and kind of sleepwalking. And I think that happens in terms of organizations as well as with people.
Hmm.
I don't think we're always as intentional or mindful as we should be or could be.
Myself included, man. I that is something that I'm really working on. Is you know, some days I feel like I just like wake up and then I go through the day, right? I know I do things that matter, right? But like how intentional was I? Right. I think that's kind of a good point, right? And you can kind of see that, right, with NASA probably being a great example of like where like things are like decades old at this point and in their infancy and have no direction, right? Or maybe not even a clear need anymore. Like with SLS, is like, why are we? I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad program, but just in general, right? Like the intent behind what we do, I think is just super important. I'm trying to work on that a lot. That's one of my top goals for 2022.
At the cost of 4.1 billion per launch, it's hard to say it's a good program.
It's hard to say it's a good program, right? I still get confused every single time because I go like, we're only making this thing because the infrastructure already exists to make it. It's probably the most inefficient way to assemble a launcher nowadays, and we're still doing it. And I get it, like I totally get it, right? I was a Marine and I've been in the government, and I understand that once something's going, you can't stop it. But it does say something about like our society and our culture that I mean, the thing that always gets me is this. Here's what I see. When I see the videos, right, of the people who are actually working on SLS, I often have to remember like those are real people that have jobs, right, and families. But at the same time, I go, what, are we still going to build a rocket that no one's going to use just so we can kind of keep the industry going? I struggle with that, but that's capitalism, right? And that's, to a degree, this is the system that we've created that allows, kind of like, I don't know, projects to nowhere, bridges to nowhere, roads to nowhere. So we're kind of good. We're good for that kind of stuff. I wasted my share of government funds as a Marine. You can believe that. I was like, we're blowing money on everything right now.
Yeah, and whenever you have the money, it's easy to do that, but you kind of create this situation where costs spiral out of control, and eventually the thing that keeps the system alive starts to die, and then you have collapse. Uh,
I,
I used to work at HP, and our printer group made so much money off of the ink, that their cost was a lot different than, say, our laptop group, who was, having to compete with Apple and with Lenovo and all these things. And so their cost was like, you know, so much smaller. And like a USB cable, both groups sold a USB cable, but the printing group apparently, you know, they didn't do as much cost cutting. They couldn't actually sell a USB cable or profit, but the laptop group could. But I mean, I guess I guess the point is that I think these inefficiencies are going to get us at some point.
do you think that so I think about that a lot too, right? Like at what point will our inefficiencies catch up to us and start like hurting us, right? But sometimes do you think that like so I look at humanity as like the biggest system, right? And I just feel like there's like quadrillion redundancy, right? Like in humanity, and we just keep going, right? Like we just keep like punching through things, and we won't stop, right? Because I get things like that right now, even in my brand, as small as we are, and the scales we are. I'm just like, man, this isn't efficient. Like I can't make any money if I do it this way. And that makes sense, right? Like you got to be able to see it over the long time, right? And that's actually, man, that's one of the things that I love about, just kind of going back to space flight and entrepreneurship. So you got to be able to plan for the horizon. I can't remember the name of the last rover that we landed.
Perseverance.
Perseverance, right? And so this in our family, right? So this is the year of the rocket. We've been focused a lot on just rockets in general, rocket propulsion, and how like the physics right behind how a rocket works. And so this was a great opportunity so we watched the launch, right? And then the transit, right, to Mars, and then the landing, right, which was super awesome because the whole like retro burn and just that little sky crane thing they did blew my mind. So much so that you kind of almost made me lose my train of thought a little bit about what I was talking about. Man, do you happen to remember what was your question again?
I forgot.
I think we were talking about like the efficiencies or something like that in space. Oh, planning,
and
right?
about it
So
catching up with
vision.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Just so to put a spacecraft down, right, on the surface of Mars in a particular spot, launching it from Earth, right, on a particular day, that requires a lot of foresight and a lot of planning, right? And that's kind of the two things I was saying that I love about space travel entrepreneurship. It's like we got to get better at thinking about the future. We're talking about our inefficiencies and things like that. So for me, I'll let out some more of my little secrets internal to our company, right? we actually have this strategy of kind of like trying to like race SpaceX, for example. So I think about goals that we have, right? And then I think, and they have goals, right? So I've been watching from like Star Hopper all the way up to whatever the last version, what I think it was SN15. And so looking at the progress, right? It was easy to get like wrapped up in the Starship launches, right? But they still had a booster to complete and an entire launch pad and this whole arm catching facility and all these other things that had to keep happening simultaneously. But more importantly, right, it's what you said earlier. They still had to hire a barista, right, to service the people who work there. And this is these complexities, right, that overlap on top of each other. And this is all inside of one system. And if you want to be like the best, you got to know how to manage all of that at the same time. And I think personally, what I've been learning about myself as an entrepreneur, it's not a talent issue, right? Like if you're at SpaceX and the job is to engineer a part, you know, there's probably 1,000 engineers, 10,000 engineers in the world who could engineer that one part. But that's not really the issue. It's like, can you engineer that part within this system, right? In a way that, hey, copy one is due next week, and then we need the final 6 weeks from now, right? And so those are the types of things that I take away from just being an entrepreneur, and that I take away from just like the whole space industry is it's like that the complexity, right, of all of these massive systems that we build. I think it brings out the best in us. It certainly brings out the best in me. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, oh, we can make our lives in the world whatever we want to. We just have to be willing to do the investment, kind of in terms of time and effort and trying.
I agree, completely agree. So I guess I'm thinking more about humanity that way now, right? Like it's, we're a society, right, that can be changed, right? And so I tend to look at those things now, like how can you take that same mindset, right? Like it takes an audacious mindset to say like let's make a permanent settlement on the moon. It takes an audacious mindset to just say I want to change like the course of humanity, right? Good, bad, or some other way. I think that's really what it's about, is that we need more audacity, right? We need more courage. Like humanity used to be very courageous. Like I think more so like now, we have buildings and roads and cars, and so nothing's really a challenge anymore. You have GPS, you can never get lost. If you're on the surface of the earth, you can't get lost anymore. There's really no challenges left, right? We don't hunt for our food. There's so many things we do not have to do. But the drive is still within us to do great things, right? And so for me, this is like we got to use this, right, to make the world a better place. Like things I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to being able to land in Beijing, Shanghai in an hour, right? Like that would be awesome. And then maybe come back the same day or the next day, right? Potentially, right? That'd be 20 years from now. If I went to Beijing now, I'd stay for 2 months. But in the future, maybe it's an overnight trip. And those are things I'm looking forward to. And it takes audacity to do that, right? It takes courage to even suggest it, right? This is why I love Elon Musk. People give him a hard time, and I don't get why. Because at least he has the audacity to say, yes, gonna put a colony on Mars. In my head, I'm like 0% chance that you're gonna be alive when if we make it that far, right? But the courage to try means that you create a reusable space launch system that makes Starlink. That's what you get as an intermediate step to trying to do some crazy things, right? And so that's why I think we set big goals, and then we pursue them with as much kind of process and efficiency as we can. So I'm looking at humanity that way, and the wealth gap things like the same mindset, right? Apply it to our problems here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's really kind of interesting with the wealth gap. I mean, people who are have some money and are successful will obviously get more money, and people who are trying to make ends meet and trying to really don't understand how business and the economy and everything works. It's hard for them to engage, and so it seems like the wealth gap is inevitable from that standpoint. That really there needs to be some type of education. I mean, I see a lot of people on the side of the street asking for money, like
Mm-hmm.
give me some, can you spare $1 or what have you. I feel like they're they're really missing out on a big opportunity. What they really want to know is, how can I get your life, and what's the path from here to there? And I mean, just knowledge is more important than a dollar or two.
I agree, man. What I think folks don't know yet, like that guy that's standing on the side of the road, he doesn't know that knowledge is more valuable than a dollar yet, right? And I'm actually kind of speaking of my own personal experience. Um, it could be very difficult. So I grew up in poverty, right? I grew up in a family of five, and I think we were raised on probably about $15,000 a year, right? So it's a pretty difficult situation to kind of make it through. And for me, I'd always been smart, right? Like half the stuff that I could talk about today, I could talk about as a 10-year-old, right? It's like really not that different, right? Especially not science and technology. Um, what it was though is that I was conditioned to money a certain way. And so there's a very specific reason that I would bring up something like the wealth gap at the same time as I'm talking about like aeronautics, right? It's because the complexity factor. That individual guy, one thing that I used to think, so I would give a lot of people money in the past, and then I would end up teaching like business classes, and I've found myself like at various stages of trying to like kind of help people along their financial path, not realizing, man, you can't help one individual. It doesn't even work like that. Like that guy standing on the side of the road asking for money, he has been conditioned to that mindset and will most likely stay in that mindset. I'm more so looking at the system, right? Like what system did we create that allows this wealth gap to exist? And those economics kind of make sense, right? Like you just described them, like for the fact that I could take a dollar today and make a dollar, maybe 30 cents tomorrow, like I'm only gonna get wealthier, right? Because I have $1.30 and I'm gonna make, some more money. You almost can't lose your money once you have enough wealth to escape. It's kind of like the gravity of like Earth. Like once you can get past like mortgage and, well, maybe not even mortgage, right? Just like the basic, like the bottom of the hierarchy of needs. Once you can escape that, you're like, I don't actually, like for me, like 4 years ago, I had $0, right? Now as a founder, thankfully the company moving forward is like, I don't need money anymore. Like I can't think of why I needed the money so bad. Things I really wanted months ago, right? I don't want, need, or care about them, because the thing that changed about me is that I understand how to generate more of it, right? And so it just becomes this game that I'm playing now, as opposed to a method for survival. And this is actually the thing that excites me the most. A lot of the work that I do kind of later on in my life will be more so dedicated to this problem. But a lot of folks, they want to approach it from kind of a very like liberal government mindset, like, oh, we can fix the issue. I don't think that's possible. I don't think humans are not very generous just like by default, right? So like, I don't see anyone voting to just make a system where everyone kind of wins. I don't even think that's possible, right? We could talk about politics one day. What I see it being is, how do you create the scenario to where people have the opportunity to cross the gap efficiently? That's really all it's about. Like I've spent a good deal of my life trying to cross that gap, right? Not realizing that half those bridges had fallen apart, right? There was just a bridgehead, no bridge. And so, I've just been trying to figure it out. And I think and that's actually what that album Spinach is about, quite frankly. Spinach is like this metaphor for dark money, if you will, perhaps dirty money, right? And so I've walked that journey, and I think others can, right? But quite frankly, I've been approaching this very much from an engineer's mindset, right? Like how I reverse engineered this $150,000 wealth gap in my life, right? Like how do I, because it's not the same as income, right? It's got to just be kind of sitting around. So I don't know. This is cool. I don't really get to talk about these topics all at the same time, but coffee, space travel, or just space exploration, and the wealth gap. These are the three things that like they go together for me, right? One of the things, I was reading, I forget the name of the book, but one of the things that kind of like talking about the wealth gap, one of the things that kind of worries me is this, right? So like if you look at who's building space launch companies right now, it's only the wealthy, right? And so what's going to happen is the wealthy will then get first access to the new technologies that come out particularly in low Earth orbit. And it kind of will begin creating this, like, remember Elysium, the movie Elysium?
Yeah,
It'll
exactly.
begin to create this scenario, right? And then if you're down here, right, on the planet, like you will never have that ability to generate that wealth the first time, right? And so that's kind of a thing, like if you didn't get on the gold rush, if you didn't get on the American land grab, like all of these different things, you got to be able to get into those economies early on. And so it's these are big issues, man. These are really big issues, but this is what we're made for as people. We're made to like take on big things. So yeah.
But you talk about the person on the side of the street being kind of conditioned that way and having that mindset. I was wondering how much of our educational system plays into that, because from like kindergarten, it's we're going to tell you what to do. You just go through this path. You don't ever have to really figure things out for yourself in the sense of what am I going to do with my time? What's valuable? How do I make stuff happen? You're just kind of like on this conveyor belt of kind of people creating your path for you, and then suddenly you just fall off on the end and it's like, okay, now go do something great, and it's like, what do you
Makes no
mean?
sense.
I have no
Yeah.
clue.
Look, this year, so 2 years ago, I took my children out of the educational system. Fortunately, we're fortunate enough to be able to homeschool them because of that. Well, first, like that's the entire issue, right? We have an industrialized education system that's like sending you towards industry, if you will, right? And so where does that go? Like as an individual, like you said, you get taught early on, right? We our financial education as well is kind of like, it's almost like a peasant class education, right? Like we get taught about like spending and saving. Like we get taught like how to shop and buy, right? Like the word invest doesn't even come up. And it should be like the only word that maybe comes up when talking about money early on in life. Like we shouldn't train consumers. And essentially, when I look at our education system from both ends, I just feel like industry has their fingers. They're literally manipulating the whole thing. And I don't say that like they're doing it in a particularly nefarious way. I just think it's the status quo. Like it had to evolve this way. We left the farms, right, and came into the cities, and then parents went to work. So we had to we created schools before then, but the school really is like a substitute for parenting now. And I'm an education guy. I got a master's in education. A big part of where I thought I was going with that wealth gap, I thought I could kind of teach, my way out of it, not realizing, no, there's a bigger issue at play. The education system is huge. For a guy, I'm gonna tell you this, like, I'm very thankful. Whenever I talk about education, I try not to deter people from their particular path. But I'll tell you what, I got 3 degrees. I've always done well in school, and it doesn't help me very much. Not on the path that I'm trying to go in life, which is to improve myself, right, and to improve my community. I would have been, a person like me would have been far better served like in the environment that my sons are raised in, for example, where also, here's what I'd say. In 2021, life's different. A lot of basic education, just, you don't need to go to school. Like, you don't need to go to school for 7 hours a day to get 45 minutes of solid instruction, right? Because half the day is walking to the bathroom, right? Listening to whatever the teacher just told you to do, like this, all these things that, like, how much contact time with education? I'd say a good 45 minutes to an hour and a half a day, maybe. And I'm like, dude, I can get all that done with my children much sooner, much easier, right? And so I think that if we could like focus on making our society, if we could focus on like making our society push people to pursue like their higher level, we do better, right? And I don't want to make it a political thing, but like right now we're pushing people to not pursue things that would make them potentially fail, right? And so it's kind of like, play it so safe that you don't accomplish anything in life. And then what happens is, like, you have a lot of people that haven't really fulfilled a purpose, right? And since they haven't done that, like, I don't know, society is very disgruntled. I don't think anybody's challenged right now, right? Like humanity it's the easiest that life has ever been. And I think I said that earlier, right? Like we're not utilizing this the way we had to when it was maybe like say like stone tools to metal, right? Like we were still working really, really hard. But I mean, there's not much that the human needs to do today to survive. So maybe making more money one day will cause us to evolve into more thoughtful creatures, maybe.
But I was thinking, with my kids, if I had it to do over again, I was thinking, go and live like on a primitive farm, and then over the years introduce different technology, so that then they really kind of, appreciate what that has, and they also understand they could do without it. That is both of those things. One is you can do
Yeah.
without it, but you probably don't have the skills or the mentality for it right now. But you could, because people did. And then also you should have really appreciate it because it is saving you so much.
Yeah, that's it. That's actually super cool the way you just said it. Like start out on a primitive farm, right? Because I'm like constantly yelling. Humans didn't have all of this 1,000 years ago, much less 5,000 years ago, right? And I'm just I don't necessarily look back at those. I don't want to sleep outside. Like I was in a Marine. I think also being a Marine, I have a better appreciation of like what it means to just live outside, right? Like I've spent 40 days just living on the side of a mountain with no shelter. And so it's like, that makes you, I was so mentally tough when I came out of that. Like nothing fazed me, right? And so now, if the temperature's off by 3 degrees in the house, I gotta go. It's a big issue nowadays.
It's the same thing here too. At one point we had 8 people living here in my house during COVID, and kids and friends and family and that type of thing. And I swear all 8 of us had different temperatures, and it was quite the thing.
Gotcha. Nice, nice, nice.
And so I have one last question for you. If it was safe and affordable, would you take a trip to space?
It's already safe and affordable, man. I think about this all the time. My wife and I, we will. So when we've been watching all the private launches and looking at the cost, I think I forget what the cheapest seat is right now. It's like 250,000, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think so. I I think Virgin Galactic is the cheapest for like a suborbital flight. I believe they've increased their price like to 350 or
Okay.
something like that. But they're also not flying until next year. And then Jeff Bezos's New Shepard, the prices seems very high on that. I've heard something like $1 million. Like they're really milking it. It's either $1 million or free. Those seem to be the two.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I mean, I'm kind of the same way with our coffee. You can just have a bunch of it for free or pay a whole lot for one bag, right? I'd absolutely go. Look, man, I've been probably like a lot of people. I've been envisioning like that moment where you can like look over the horizon of the earth and definitely kind of look out. I've been picturing that moment in my head for like a long time. Just to let you know a little bit more about me. So I'm not just a kind of aerospace enthusiast. One of the main reasons I'm not flying now, I had a heart murmur. So I was qualifying to be an aviator in the Air Force. And I had some abnormal kind of fleet thing going on with my heart. So couldn't continue pursuing aviation, certainly not jets at that point. Come to find out, the little issue I suffer from is not even an issue. And people like almost every other branch, you could be an aviator without it. So it wasn't like personally that big of a thing. And I say that because in my head, right, the entire reason that I went to the DoD initially is because I wanted to be an astronaut, like so many people, right? And fortunately, that aviation contract didn't work out for me because it allowed me to. I needed to go experience what I experienced, right? Like I needed to be a guy that was a kind of a ground commander for some time. I needed that kind of toughening up in life. And so I don't regret it, but I would absolutely go. That's been one of my goals my whole life. And one of those songs that I talk about Robert Goddard's first rockets, right? There's a program called Civil Air Patrol. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's like, okay, cool. So I was a CAP cadet from about as early as you can join until I think I stopped as a sophomore in college. I was still mentoring. So I got all the badges, all the rocketries. I went to all the camps. Well, all the ones I could afford at the time. Like I went to pretty much everything that I could. I love it. I would certainly be there. I prefer to fly SpaceX if I could, but hey, those are expensive flights at this point. So how about you? Would you go?
I think before I started this project and before the COVID lockdowns, I said, yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
But listening to people's hesitation, and then also I think the COVID lockdowns kind of reduce our risk tolerance.
Okay, yeah,
Because you're kind of like in this fear mode, and that affects everything in your life, really.
yeah.
So there's some things that I I feel like I should do, but would have trouble doing, like skydiving. I mean, I think if you're gonna go to space, you should be able to do skydiving. Like that, like going to space is going to be so much more dangerous than
Hmm.
skydiving is. So I'm definitely afraid of heights. So the
Okay, yeah.
idea of jumping out of a perfectly good airplane is not not something I've quite gotten to. So um, I I think what I would say is I'm not ready, but I want to get ready. Maybe that's what I say.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. Have you seen the balloon? I forget. I keep seeing this ad pop up. Right. It's just like this massive balloon supposed to be able to take you right to the edge of the stratosphere, or whichever lets you. I forget how high a balloon can go. Um, but it's supposed to be like you take off at night, right? It's this long, slow ascent, and you wake up and you ascend into the stars, right? And then you're able to wake up to see the sun, coming over the horizon of the earth. So I don't know. I think for me, as much as I love space, so as a kid, right, if you're growing up and you love space travel and you're watching any type of rocket development, you just mostly watching the booms, right? Like 3, 2, 1, boom, right? And I was explaining that to my wife, like how in rocket testing, it's always catastrophic failure, right? There's no such thing as a small malfunction, right? Um, Typically there's enough redundancies that those aren't issues. And so I've kind of pictured that in my head, right? Like just all of these rockets that, especially the military rocket, like a lot of those in the 60s and 70s, just massive failures. And I have those burned in my head, right? Of rockets leaving the pad 4 feet off the ground, boom, right? And so yeah, I would still go. I'll put it to you like that. I'll go. It scares me. But once I saw my confidence went up with Falcon 9 launching the Crew Dragon capsule. That actually gave me more, because if space flights to become a real thing, right, you got to approach like airline safety, right? And so I think we'll get there, right? Like Elon said something about it in terms of, the difference is, there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. There have been millions of commercial airline flights, right? And so we're at the point where there are still so few rockets launched that we just haven't had time, right, to kind of weed out all the potential safety issues and to just learn enough to make this, kind of a mode of transport that would feel comparable to just buying an airline ticket. So I look forward to that's really one of the things, like the launch cadence, the learning, right, that comes from that is probably, you can't replace that education. So I'd go. I'll be the first one to sign up. Maybe I'll do the hip hop show in space.
That'd be fantastic. I can't wait to see that.
All
Well,
right, we'll
Mike,
pitch you on.
I really appreciate your time, and I
Mhm.
feel like you and I could probably talk for a long time. So I
Yeah,
hope we cross paths again and get
for sure.
maybe a dope coffee. We can have a cup of coffee and continue the discussion sometime.
Hey, maybe we'll do it in Houston. Okay.
That'd be fantastic. Well, you have a good rest of your day, and thank
All
you
right.
again
Thank you.
so much.
All right. That's awesome. Have a good one.
Okay.